So, good evening. Tonight I thought I'm going to make a very different video. Um, I get frequent questions on the videos I post from subscribers and viewers, and some people they email me, they contact me, and then they call me or they text me. And one question which always comes up is, how does the vacuum actually work and what part is what and why am I having vacuum leaks? So let me pull this a little bit up. I had to move onto my floor here. This is our man cave or my man cave here. And I please disregard any stains on the carpet. We're in the basement here. That's my little kitchen and bar, so to speak. And that is where we can do these kind of things, and we're not getting in hot water here with the rest of the people who inhabit the building. That's nice, huh? So let me explain this to actually on how this works with the vacuums. This car or any car who has a Jetronic has basically two parallel vacuum or intake systems. One is the main vacuum and the other one is the idle speed or idle RPM vacuum. And many times in the literature, I don't know if you can see this here, I touched this here. These hoses here have gotten all sorts of names. I got this setup here from a viewer who took it out of his 560 because he wants to convert his car to a pulsed injection system, so something completely aftermarket, and I figured that's a good opportunity. So he donated me his parts and we can take a look at this, because he started to have issues and problems, and of course that is something, you know, I can explain here. Now, before we get into all of this stuff, this hose here, this hose which goes underneath here, which is this here, I got this hidden underneath here, this connecting hose, which sits on top here. I don't have a boot, so normally there's the boot underneath it, and that boot connects to your main throttle. That is the main vacuum going through here. And at idle speed, this is completely closed. There's no bypass here. This is then basically going in here, and from here it goes into the idle speed control valve or through the idle speed control valve, and it connects here on the boot. This here is the intake manifold system out of metal, which is available here at this port. And when you open this up, this here, if I can move it a little bit forward, opens up the plate. It pulls the plate down. That in turn pushes the let me see if I can show this. This pushes the pin in there, the piston of the fuel distributor. So if you have no fuel, coming out, then you have no vacuum. No vacuum, no fuel. As simple as that. The idle speed control system basically gets its vacuum through these little cups here, which sit directly in the cylinder head, and they're pointing directly towards the intake valve cavity, and they spray that right in there, and you have your injector plugged in here. So that's basically how this works. And these connectors here basically draw a constant vacuum every time the engine is on the vacuum or on the intake cycle, and it opens up the intake valve. And they combine this here, one cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This will give you an average vacuum at 650, 700 RPM of about between 15 to 17 inch mercury. If your vacuum is substantially higher, then your idle speed will go up. And this here basically regulates this. because this system is above the closed valve, throttle body. This vacuum here now pulls this plate down only minimal with 17, 15, 16, 17-inch mercury, just like this. And that will allow the fuel flow to go into each of these injectors at about, on this engine here, at 4 milliliter per minute. And if you watch the other video, then you know that this is like a drop per second, 1 drop per second when you use water as a comparison or as a demonstrator. Now, with this being said, is if you have a leak here on any of these connecting points, or on this hose, or on this hose over here, or here to these cups, if these cups are not sitting in the cylinder head fully sealed, or if the injectors no longer seal into the cup, you're going to have problems. And there's now one thing I really wanted to explain, especially to the younger viewers. The fuel we had, say like in the 1960s and early 1970s here in the United States, and over in Europe till about to the probably early 90s, mid 90s, the only additive, or one of the few additives the fuel actually had, the raw gasoline, was lead. Because of environmental concern, the lead was taken out, and then the oil refineries started to add different additives to the now unleaded fuel. And in the 90s, I forgot exactly now when, in the mid 90s, someone in the Clinton years had that brilliant idea to add ethanol to this whole system. And so when the ethanol thing really didn't come until full swing until the 2000s, when Bush took over. And they started to basically convert corn into ethanol here, which is basically a form of alcohol. This system, as you see it, didn't have any ethanol exposure, and the fuel we had in Europe and in the United States was unleaded at the time available, because this is a catalytic converter version. But the fuel distributor and any fuel-related parts, the injectors, they can handle leaded fuel, because that car was available leaded and unleaded. The fuel distributor can handle both of it. Your catalytic converter cannot, so don't even get the idea to put a lead substitute into your fuel to improve anything. It won't. Because the compression ratio on the US engine is too low for leaded fuel, and the valves are different. So you would destroy the valves by running leaded fuel through this system here. But it was possible to run leaded fuel through the fuel distributor in the injectors. There were also different additives in the 1980s in the fuel, and the oil or gasoline manufacturers, the refineries, they added different additives in the 1970s to the fuel than what they did in the 1980s and in the 1990s and in the 2000s and 2010. So every decade we have gone through some change that the fuel essentially has gotten different additives. And these parts, since they're that old, since there was no other fuel available in the 1980s, they were basically built and tested out on the R&D was done on fuel of the 1980s, not of the 1990s, not of the 2000s, not of 2010. And there was no ethanol in the picture at that point at all. No one even had thought about this. Now, with that being said, these things will run on ethanol, but they are not made to sit for very long with ethanol in it. Either the injectors or the fuel distributor, pressure regulator, or the EHA valve. Let me just get that here. This thing here, the EHA valve. None of these things here, I hope you could see all of the stuff what I'm showing you, was made for this ethanol stuff. And they can handle it when you run it, but don't let the car sit I haven't really done a test for how long this takes to clog this stuff up, but I'm going to show you something on the intake side of the EHA valve. You can see there is a micro mesh. Where's the camera here? Mesh. Let me see if we can zoom in. No, it doesn't, but you hardly see it. The zooming doesn't work right with these things here. Let me see if I can do it this way. Yeah, now we can see it. You can see the insert there. And this stuff, because it is so fine, will clog up very, very quickly. The only way you can actually get this out of there is with the citric acid at almost a boiling temperature. I mean, we're talking 90 degrees Celsius and almost like 100, so just below boiling. Now, if you have never worked on the system, and you're trying to get used to this, the vacuum here, which comes with the engine cycling through their, strokes up, and they accumulate it. This is basically an accumulator system here. And so cumulative, because they overlap, you will get about 15 to 17 inch mercury. If your timing chain is stretched or your timing chain tensioner doesn't have the right oil in it, which is usually a very heavy oil to keep the chain under tension, then the timing of the intake valves will change, which has a direct impact on the vacuum here. And you can measure this. There's a port here on the intake manifold, which goes to the EZL unit, that vacuum line. And if you put a vacuum gauge on there, that will tell you your vacuum you're actually having. And usually what happens is when the timing chain goes off, either through stretch or a bad end or problems with the chain tensioner, then you're going to have a higher vacuum on higher than 17 inch mercury. This is when you're getting to 20, 21 inch mercury. And when you're measuring around, say, I would say as a good number, anything higher than 19 inch mercury, then your plate is going to be pulled down too much, and this unit can no longer regulate your RPM correctly to 650 or 750 in that range, and you wind up at 800, 900 RPM. That is one issue you're having, or you can experience in these systems. Now let me take this apart real quick here. Put this away here. The real issue is here. You can see this on how easy this comes apart. This is where those hoses wear out. This is an aftermarket hose he had in here. And this will wear out from here. You can see how easy, I can see, are we focusing? Yeah. See this, how easy this pops out? So this is pretty much toast. This is a leak here. Then we have a leak here. And this is a aftermarket hose here. It doesn't matter if it is aftermarket or Mercedes-Benz. This here comes out like this. I'll see if I can get this to zoom. Yeah, here. See this? It doesn't quite fit, and it has shrunk already, and it just pulls out like this. And the same here. This one is actually still good on the metal. And these two, that is marginal. This one here is marginal if it comes off like this. And then this one here is pretty worn out too. This is okay. And this is okay. So this would be, they should be replaced, all of them, when they get to this point where this is at. Is that adjusting or not? Huh. Let me see. We got the camera now all confused. There we go. Now we can do it. Sorry about this. So this is the problems. And now the real big problem becomes, this is now a Mercedes-Benz one he had in his car. Let me see if I can get around it. Yeah. Yeah, once you have the background, you can see the Mercedes-Benz number and the star here. Definitely Mercedes-Benz part. And this is your issue you're gonna face here, is you can see this has shrunk. And as soon as this goes like this here, where this can wobble from the vibration, you're gonna have a leak on it. And this is what I had on my Mercedes-Benz hoses right after about 6 months in the car in the summer. Yeah, it will focus only on the background. Ha! Yeah, you can see it. Now you can see this and how this has actually disformed and cut in on every one of them. And I have the same issue. This one might be still good. That is something else. This one is fairly okay. So it is the outer ones which deteriorate. And this is where you're gonna find your vacuum leaks, because this here, even when it is in like this, it is still gonna start leaking. Besides of the O-rings here, these here, they leak, and then the top part leaks as well. Those are aftermarket cups, basically. I call them cups. This is the primary issue here, where you get idle. You can see this on this hose here as well. Yeah. And I don't know for how long they were in his car. Yeah, you can see this. Let me get one of my hoses. See this? Mercedes. This is actually a Mercedes-Benz hose. This is an authentic one. And we're having the same problem here. You can see this here. This is starting. And this is basically after 6 months. And this is the same issue as with the fuel. The rubber we had in the 1980s, which was made in Germany, was very, very different from the rubber which we have today. The Mercedes-Benz part, you can see this here. Let me see if I can zoom in on this here. It looks like it that someone on this unit had actually removed the Mercedes-Benz sign up here. You can see this. This mark here has been removed. Otherwise, the part numbers are the same. This rubber here I got, you can see this, that looks very different. And as crazy as they are over in Germany with the environmental protection stuff, this is recycled rubber. And this doesn't last more than 6 months. This is what that looks like. That was in there longer. A more natural, this is natural rubber. You can see the shininess compared to this here. So this is how you can separate natural rubber from recycled rubber. Just that you have an idea. And the additives in these rubbers, and both of them, are no longer the same. And the manufacturers of these hoses obviously cannot get two things straight, especially the aftermarket ones, is the diameters for the stuff to work properly. When you look at this here, on how easy this actually goes in and out. You see this? There's virtually no resistance here. There's nothing here. And that's basically where this whole thing starts. So all of this here is all vacuum related for the idle speed. Every bit of it. Every ounce. I got one too many. I have to take this out. These 4 hoses, 8 cups with 8 seals. These 2 hoses And this hose, which goes on here, is only your crankshaft ventilation. And that hole, which is little tiny hole in here, I have that in the other video from last year, is clogged off. So he had no more ventilation of his left hand crankshaft. That's basically what that looks like. And I'm going to make another video, and I'm going to explain on how these things actually work and how the wiring is with the numbers, because we have numbers in here 1 and 2, and the numbers on the connector are 1 and 2. So 1 connects to 2 and 2 connects to 1, basically, with the, oh, that's the wrong connector. This is the right connector, same story. Here we go. At the right one, you can see it 1 and 2. And you're trying to match the numbers up. You look here, it says 1 and 2 and 2 and 1. This here, the brown black wire, is the minus, and the black one is the plus. And I'm going to go into detail about these units here in a separate video for those who are interested. But this is basically the whole idle speed mechanism on how this actually works. Let me see if I can get it back together fairly quickly. I should be able to. This goes here, this goes here, this sits on here, this connects this side. There are 2 arrows on top. They have to match. Make sure when you replace them, this goes here and this goes here. And 8 cups underneath it. Any leak anywhere in this system, you're gonna have an issue. You're also gonna have an issue with the 8 donuts which are sitting underneath between the lower and upper manifold, where this whole stuff actually sits on. There's 8 donut rings in there. When they're starting to leak, that is gonna throw this off too, but it can be more or less, depends on how bad the leak is. I hope that everyone understands this now. This is not a crankcase ventilation system, only this one hose, and that has a little tiny hole in here where it just draws a little bit of air through it, and you have to keep that open because otherwise your left cylinder cover will not be, you have no crankcase ventilation on that side. The idle speed, everything here idle speed, not crankcase ventilation. This here directly influences your idle RPM and the quality of your idle besides of the fuel flow. This thing here cannot move down like this and push the piston in on the fuel distributor. No fuel flow. At idle speed, your thing should be about here. That's about how much gap you should have, right about here. Minimal. Yeah, I hope that this is going to explain this now to everyone on how this actually hooks up. It's a 2 vacuum system or 2 intake vacuum manifold system where they both operate in parallel. This system here operates in parallel with the main throttle body. The main throttle body is closed at idle. The only vacuum you have to pull this plate down goes from here and originates from all 8 cylinders on the intake side where the fuel injectors are located. So that's pretty much it here. I'm kind of tired of kneeling around on the floor, and I wish you all a great evening, and we will have a lot more videos coming. Okay, have a good night.